The great hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the dome of transparent metal and glass. Representatives from 47 different species filled the curved rows of seats that circled the central speaking platform. Some breathe oxygen, others breathe methane or chlorine, sitting in sealed chambers that kept them alive. A few existed as pure energy, their forms flickering like flames trapped in magnetic bottles. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the human delegation's modest platform, located near the back of the hall. 300 years ago, humanity had made first contact with the galaxy. 300 years of learning, adapting, and trying to find their place among the stars. And after all that time, humans still sat in the cheap seats. Elena was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She had served as Earth's voice in this chamber for 15 years. In that time, she had learned one painful truth above all others. The galaxy did not respect humanity. The galaxy barely noticed humanity at all. The delegation from Earth may now present their proposal, announced the speaker, a towering crystalline being whose voice resonated through the hall like wind chimes in a storm. Elena stepped forward and activated her translation device. Honored representatives of the Concord, Earth respectfully requests that the trade restrictions on human-manufactured medical technology be lifted. Our hospitals have developed treatments for 17 different diseases that affect member species. We wish only to share these advances and save lives. She paused, looking around the massive chamber. Most of the delegates were not even paying attention. The Cathari representatives, sleek insectoid beings with compound eyes, were engaged in what appeared to be a private business transaction. The Oravan, tall and thin with skin like polished silver, were reviewing data on personal screens. Only the Beltrani seemed to be listening, and that was never a good sign. The Veltrani were ancient. Their empire had spread across 1,000 worlds when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire. They resembled great serpents with arms, their scales a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb light. Their high speaker, a massive creature named Vithos, watched Elena with eyes like molten gold. The Veltrani Dominion objects, Vithos said, his voice a low rumble that made Elena's bones vibrate. Human medical technology has not been properly certified by Concord standards. We cannot allow untested treatments to spread through civilized space. Elena kept her expression calm. This was not the first time she had faced this particular wall. With respect, High Speaker, we have submitted our research for review 17 times over the past 30 years. Each submission has been returned with requests for additional data. We have provided that data only to receive new requests. The certification process appears to have no end. Bethos made a sound that might have been laughter coming from a creature his size. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Perhaps human science simply does not meet our standards. Perhaps you should spend another century or two developing your understanding before attempting to contribute to galactic civilization. Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. The people who could be saved by these treatments do not have a century to wait. Then they will die, Bethos replied simply. Such is the way of things. The weak perish, so that the strong may continue. Surely even humans understand this basic principle. Elena wanted to respond. She wanted to remind the High Speaker that compassion was not weakness, that the measure of a civilization was how it treated the most vulnerable. But she had given that speech before. It had changed nothing. Earth withdraws its proposal, she said quietly. We will resubmit when the Concord is ready to consider it fairly. She returned to her seat where her aide, a young man named Thomas Wright, was waiting, with barely contained frustration on his face. Ambassador, we can't keep backing down. The people back home are losing faith in the diplomatic process. I know, Elena said. But what choice do we have? We don't have the power to force anyone to listen. All we can do is keep trying. Keep hoping that eventually things will change. Thomas shook his head. Will they, though? Will things ever really change? Elena looked out at the vast chamber, at the dozens of species who had built empires while humanity was still in its cradle. She thought about her daughter, Maria, who lived on a colony world called New Eden, with her husband and 2 children. She thought about all the human worlds scattered across the stars, filled with people who just wanted to live their lives in peace. They have to, she said. They have to. Far from the Concorde Hall on a military space station orbiting Mars, Admiral Marcus Chen stood before a wall of screens, showing the disposition of Earth's defense forces. He was 63 years old, with a soldier's bearing, and the kind of eyes that had seen too much death. His uniform bore the symbols of a career that spanned 4 decades, including service in the border skirmishes that had marked humanity's early expansion into space. The numbers on his screens were not encouraging. Earth's fleet consisted of approximately 2,000 combat-capable vessels. It sounded like a lot, until you compared it to the Throny Dominion's 14,000 ships, or the Cathari Syndicate's 8,000, or the combined fleets of the Concorde's other major powers. Admiral, his aide, Commander Sarah Webb, approached with a data tablet. The latest intelligence report from the frontier. Chen took the tablet and scanned its contents. His jaw tightened as he read. 3 more raids on human shipping lanes. Cathari pirates operating with what looks like syndicate approval. 12 cargo ships lost. 247 crew members dead or missing. The syndicate claims no responsibility. Sir, they say these are independent operators beyond their control. Of course they do. Chen set the tablet down. And the Conquered will accept that explanation just like they always do. Just like they did last month, and the month before that. Commander Webb hesitated before speaking. Sir, there are officers in the fleet who are saying we should take action ourselves. Strike back at the pirates. Show the syndicate that attacking human ships has consequences, and start a war we cannot win. Chen shook his head. No, our orders are clear. We defend when attacked. We protect what we can, but we do not provoke conflicts with powers that could destroy us. How long, sir? How long do we let them pick us apart piece by piece? Chen turned to look out the viewport at the red surface of Mars below. In the distance, he could see the lights of human colonies. Millions of people building new lives on a world their ancestors never imagined they would reach. As long as we have to, he said. War is not a game, Commander. It's not about pride or revenge. It's about survival. Right now, the best way for humanity to survive is to endure, to be patient, to grow stronger quietly, while the older species ignore us. And if they never stop ignoring us, if they decide to do more than ignore us. Chen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. Then, God help them because we won't. The Cathari Syndicate controlled more than 200 star systems, each one dedicated to generating wealth for the great merchant houses that ruled their society. They were traders and negotiators, deal makers and manipulators. They never fought wars themselves, but they were quite happy to profit from the wars of others. Syndicate Representative Chickasaw sat in her private office aboard the Concord station, reviewing the latest reports from human space. Her compound eyes processed information at speeds no human could match, analyzing trade flows and economic indicators with practiced ease. The humans continue to expand their colonial territory, she noted to her assistant. Their population has grown by 12% in the last decade. Their industrial output has nearly doubled. Should we be concerned? Her assistant asked. Concerned? No. The humans are a minor species. They lack the military strength to threaten us, and the political influence to obstruct us, but they are useful. Chicksaw's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. Their colonies produce raw materials at very low cost. Their workers accept wages that would be considered insulting elsewhere, and their desperation for acceptance in the Concorde makes them willing to agree to trade terms that heavily favor our interests. The recent raids on their shipping have disrupted some of that trade, a temporary inconvenience, nothing more. The raids serve a purpose. They remind the humans of their vulnerability. They encourage the humans to seek our protection, which we will graciously provide in exchange for even more favorable trade terms. Chicks reviewed another data stream. The humans call themselves patient. They believe that if they simply endure long enough, the galaxy will eventually accept them as equals. They are fools. The galaxy will never accept them because we will never allow it. Their role is to serve, to provide, to be exploited. That is the natural order of things. And if they object to this arrangement, what can they do? Challenge the Syndicate? Challenge the Roni? Challenge the entire Concord? Chickasaw made a dismissive gesture. They are 300 years old. We are 30,000. They have 2,000 ships. We have 8,000. They are children playing at civilization, and children do not dictate terms to their elders. On the colony world of Proxima Centauri b, the closest human settlement to Earth, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo walked through the halls of the Central Medical Center. She was a xenobiologist, one of humanity's leading experts on alien physiology. Her research had contributed to some of the medical breakthroughs that Ambassador Vasquez had tried to share with the Concord. Sarah was thinking about her daughter Grace, who was 7 years old and waiting at home with her grandmother. Grace loved to hear stories about the aliens her mother studied. She would ask questions for hours, fascinated by the idea that the universe was full of strange and wonderful beings. Sarah wished she could share her daughter's innocent wonder, but she had worked with alien species for too long. She had seen how they treated humans, the casual contempt, the subtle discrimination, the constant reminder that humanity was young and weak and unimportant. Her communicator buzzed. She checked the message and felt a chill run through her. Dr. Okonkwo, please report to the director's office immediately. Urgent matter. She hurried through the corridors and found Director Youssef Ali waiting for her, his face grave. With him was a man she didn't recognize, wearing the uniform of Earth's intelligence services. Dr. Okonkwo, the director said, this is Agent Michael Torres. He has something to show you. Torres activated a holographic display. It showed a star chart of human space, with dozens of points marked in red. Over the past year, Torres said, we have detected a series of unauthorized intrusions into human colonial territory. The intrusions were carried out by Oravon research vessels. They were conducting what they described as scientific surveys. But our intelligence suggests their true purpose was far more sinister. He changed the display to show images that made Sarah's stomach turn. Medical facilities, examination tables, children strapped down crying as silver-skinned Oravon technicians worked over them with instruments. They have been harvesting genetic material from human colonists, particularly from children. They claim it is for cataloging purposes, but we believe they are actually developing bioweapons targeted specifically at human physiology. Sarah stared at the images in horror. This is monstrous. Has this been reported to the Concord? It has. The Concord issued a formal reprimand and required the Oravan to pay a small fine. The research vessels were allowed to continue their work. That's it? That's all they did? Torres nodded. The Oravan are a major power. The Conqueror does not wish to antagonize them over what they consider a minor matter involving a minor species. Sarah felt something break inside her. All her life she had believed in the promise of the galaxy. She had believed that if humanity just worked hard enough, proved themselves worthy enough, the older species would eventually accept them. But this was proof that acceptance would never come. The galaxy did not see humans as potential partners or future friends. The galaxy saw humans as resources to be exploited, subjects to be experimented on, children to be used and discarded. What can we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Officially, nothing. We continue to file protests. We continue to hope that something will change. Torres paused. Unofficially, there are those who believe that hope is no longer enough, that humanity needs to prepare for the day when patience is no longer an option. He handed her a data chip. If you're interested in learning more, this will tell you where to find us. We call ourselves the Reckoning, and we believe that someday the galaxy will learn to regret the way it has treated humanity. Sarah took the chip. She thought about Grace, about the images of children on examination tables, about a galaxy that would never see her daughter as anything more than a specimen to be studied. I'll think about it, she said, but in her heart, she had already decided. Deep in the asteroid belt beyond Neptune, far from any shipping lanes or observation posts, something stirred in the darkness. It had been growing there for nearly 200 years, hidden by distance and deception. The project had been started by leaders who knew that humanity's patience could not last forever. It had been continued by their successors, who understood that sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to prepare for war. The construction dock stretched for thousands of miles through the scattered rocks and ice. Robotic workers moved in perfect coordination. assembling ships of designs that no one outside this hidden facility had ever seen. The vessels were neither elegant nor graceful. They were functional. They were deadly. They were built for one purpose, and one purpose only. In the command center at the heart of the facility, a woman named Admiral Zhang Wei reviewed the latest progress reports. She was 71 years old, and she had dedicated the last 40 years of her life to this project. She had never married, never had children. The fleet was her family. The mission was her life. "How many ships are combat ready?" she asked her aide. 14,217, ma'am. Another 3,000 are in final assembly and will be completed within the next 2 years. Zhang Yi nodded slowly. 14,000 ships, more than enough to match the Velrani, more than enough to devastate the Cathari, more than enough to make the entire Concord think twice about ever threatening humanity again. And the Orpheus Protocol fully operational. Ma'am, the system has been observing and analyzing alien communication, tactics, and psychology for the past 180 years. It has developed detailed profiles of every major species in the Concord, including predicted responses to various military scenarios. Good. Zhang Yi looked at the vast display showing the hidden fleet. Each point of light represented a warship that no one outside this facility knew existed. Each ship represented years of sacrifice, of resources diverted from other needs, of secrets kept even from humanity's closest allies. She hoped they would never have to use these ships. She prayed that humanity's patience would be rewarded, that the galaxy would eventually change, that the older species would learn to see humans as equals rather than prey. But she knew better. She had studied history, both human and alien. She knew that the powerful never surrendered their advantages willingly. She knew that respect was never given freely to those who could not demand it. Someday, humanity would reach the end of its patience. Someday, the galaxy would push too far, take too much, hurt too many. And on that day, this fleet would emerge from the darkness in the universe, would learn a truth that it had foolishly forgotten. There was nothing more dangerous than a patient creature that had finally run out of patience. Zhang Wei turned off the display and returned to her quarters. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do, more ships to build, more weapons to develop, more preparations to make. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that the day of reckoning was coming closer. Every insult, every injustice, every drop of human blood spilled and ignored was bringing that day nearer. The galaxy would not see it coming. The galaxy never did. In the Great Hall of the Concord, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was preparing for another session, another round of proposals that would be rejected, another day of enduring contempt with a professional smile. In the command center over Mars, Admiral Marcus Chen was reviewing casualty reports from the latest round of pirate attacks, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. In the medical center on Proxima, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo was holding a data chip in her hands, thinking about her daughter and wondering what kind of future awaited her in a galaxy that would never care about her safety. And in the darkness beyond Neptune, 14,000 warships waited in silence, their weapons cold, their crews ready, their purpose clear. Humanity was patient, but patience was not the same as weakness. And someday soon, the galaxy would learn the difference. The colony on Kepler 442b was called New Hope. It was a fitting name for a world that represented everything humanity had dreamed of during its expansion into the stars. The planet had breathable air, drinkable water, and soil rich enough to grow crops from Earth. 12,000 people had made their homes there, building farms and schools and hospitals, raising families, and planning futures. The Cathari came without warning. They called it a corporate security action. The official explanation was that a human trading company had violated a contract with the syndicate, and that the Cathari were simply collecting what they were owed. But the truth was much simpler. New Hope sat on land that the syndicate wanted. The humans were in the way, and in the cold calculation of the Cathari, removing them was merely a business expense. The attack lasted less than an hour. Syndicate warships descended from orbit, their weapons carving through the colonial defenses like a hot knife through butter. The small militia that tried to resist was obliterated in the first 5 minutes. After that, it was just slaughter. Marcus Chen received the news in his office over Mars. He sat in silence as the casualty figures climbed higher and higher. 3,000 dead, 5,000, 8,000. By the time the syndicate ships withdrew, satisfied that their security action was complete, 12,000 human beings had ceased to exist. An entire colony wiped out in less time than it took to eat lunch. Chen's hands shook as he sat down the report. In 40 years of military service, he had seen death in many forms. He had fought pirates and criminals and rogue elements of his own species, but he had never witnessed anything like this. An entire world full of innocent people destroyed for profit. "Sir," Commander Webb's voice was hollow. "The Concord has issued its ruling on the incident." "Let me guess," Chen said. "It's been classified as a civil dispute." "Yes, sir. The Concord has determined that the Cathari acted within their rights under interstellar commercial law. They have recommended that humanity file a complaint through the standard arbitration process. The standard process takes 20 years. "Yes, sir." Chen stood and walked to the viewport. Mars hung below, red and ancient, a world that humanity had transformed through centuries of patient effort. He thought about New Hope, about the families who had built their lives there, about the children who would never grow up. "Get me a secure line to Earth," he said. "I need to speak with the Chancellor." Chancellor David Park was 58 years old, a former diplomat who had risen to lead Earth's government through a combination of patience, intelligence, and an unshakable belief in the power of peaceful engagement. He had spent his entire career building bridges between humanity and the other species of the galaxy. He had always believed that if humans just tried hard enough, worked long enough, and proved themselves worthy, the older races would eventually accept them. The massacre at New Hope shook that belief to its foundation. 12,000 people, he said to his advisors. It gathered in the crisis room beneath the government complex in Geneva. 12,000 human beings murdered. And the Concord calls it a business dispute. "The Cathari have significant economic influence in the Concord," said Foreign Minister Liu Wei. "Many species depend on their trade networks. No one wants to antagonize them. So we are expected to simply accept this to file a complaint and wait 20 years while the syndicate continues to operate without consequence. That appears to be the expectation." "Yes." Park slammed his fist on the table. It was an uncharacteristic display of emotion for a man known for his calm demeanor, and it startled everyone in the room. "This is not acceptable," he said. "This cannot continue. We cannot keep sacrificing our people on the altar of diplomatic process while the galaxy treats us like prey." "What alternative do we have?" asked Defense Minister James Morrison. "Our military is not strong enough to challenge the syndicate directly. Any attempt at retaliation would likely provoke a response we cannot survive." "I know." Park took a deep breath, forcing himself to regain control. "I know our options are limited, but there must be something we can do. Something that sends a message that we will not accept this treatment forever." Admiral Chen's face appeared on one of the display screens. He had been listening to the meeting remotely. Chancellor Chen said, "There may be something that I was not supposed to discuss without authorization from the previous administration, but given the circumstances, I believe you need to know." "What are you talking about, Admiral?" "Sir, I'm talking about Project Prometheus." The name meant nothing to Park, or most of his advisors, but Defense Minister Morrison's face went pale. Admiral Morrison said, "That project was classified at the highest level. I was told it was merely a contingency study. It was 30 years ago. Since then, it has become something more." Chen's expression was grave. "Chancellor, I would like to arrange a briefing for you and a small group of advisors. What I have to show you may change the way you think about humanity's position in the galaxy." The meeting took place 2 weeks later in a secure facility, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Park brought only his most trusted advisors, Morrison, Liu, and Admiral Chen himself. What they saw there changed everything. "My God," Park whispered, looking at the holographic display of the hidden fleet. "How is this possible? How did we build all of this without anyone knowing?" "The project began over 200 years ago," Chen explained. "The leaders of that time understood that humanity's peaceful approach to galactic relations might not last forever. They established a secret construction program hidden in the outer reaches of the solar system, designed to build a military force capable of defending humanity against any threat. 14,000 ships, Morrison said, his voice awed. That's more than their Roni Dominion. Yes, and our ships are more advanced. We've had 2 centuries to develop new technologies. While the older species have grown complacent, their weapons and defenses haven't significantly changed in thousands of years. Ours have never stopped improving. Park stared at the display for a long moment. Why wasn't I told about this when I took office? The previous chancellor believed you would not approve. He thought your commitment to peace might lead you to shut down the project. Chen met Park's eyes. Was he wrong? Park considered the question carefully. His entire career had been built on the belief that violence was never the answer, that patience and diplomacy could solve any problem. But 12,000 people were dead on New Hope, and the Concord had done nothing. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm glad the project exists. Even if we never use these ships knowing they're there. He paused. It changes things. It gives us options. Chen agreed. Options we didn't have before. What else should I know about? Chen hesitated. There is one more thing, the most sensitive part of the entire project. He entered a command, and a new display appeared. It showed a complex network of connections, like a brain made of light. We call it the Orpheus Protocol. It's an artificial intelligence system designed for one purpose, to analyze and understand every other species in the galaxy, their psychology, their tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. An AI. Lu looked alarmed. The Concord has strict laws against artificial intelligence, above a certain level of complexity. The Concord's laws do not apply to projects they don't know exist. And Orpheus is unique. It doesn't just analyze data. It thinks. It learns. It predicts. We have been feeding it information about every major species for nearly 200 years. It knows them better than they know themselves. What exactly can it do? Chen's expression was grim. If we ever go to war, Orpheus will know our enemies' moves before they make them. It will identify weaknesses we could never find on our own. It will turn every battle into a foregone conclusion. He paused. Chancellor, with this fleet and this system, we could defeat any power in the galaxy, perhaps all of them combined. The room was silent. Park felt the weight of the knowledge pressing down on him. For 3 centuries, humanity had endured insults and exploitation because they believed they had no choice. Now he knew that choice had always existed. The question was whether he would ever be forced to make it. We will keep this secret, Park finally said. We will continue our diplomatic efforts. We will not seek war. He looked at Chen. But if war comes to us, if the galaxy pushes us beyond what we can endure, we will be ready. Yes, sir, Chen said. We will be ready. The years that followed seemed designed to test humanity's patience to its absolute limit. The Oravan continued their research expeditions to human colonies. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo joined the reckoning and began documenting every instance of abuse, building a record that she hoped would one day serve as evidence in a tribunal that would hold the Oravan accountable. She collected testimonies from parents whose children had been taken for examination. She gathered medical records showing the long-term damage caused by Oravan experiments, and she watched as the Concord did nothing. Captain James Reyes was a decorated officer in Earth's fleet, a man who had spent 20 years defending human shipping lanes from pirates and raiders. When the Keith Syndicate began openly supporting attacks on human vessels, he petitioned his superiors for permission to respond. Each time he was denied. Each time he was told that humanity could not afford to provoke a larger conflict. After the 15th denial, Reyes submitted his resignation. His letter became famous, passed secretly from officer to officer throughout the fleet. I joined the military to protect my people, he wrote, but I cannot protect them if I am not permitted to fight. I cannot watch my fellow humans die while I stand idle, following orders that prioritize diplomatic convenience over human lives. I do not know what the future holds for humanity, but I know that I can no longer be part of a system that sacrifices our people for the sake of peace that exists only on paper. Thousands of officers followed his example. Some retired, others transferred to civilian positions. The brain drain weakened Earth's official military, even as the secret fleet in the outer system continued to grow. And then came the blockade of Proxima. The Franni announced it without warning. They called it an administrative quarantine, claiming that human vessels from Proxima had been carrying unauthorized biological materials that posed a threat to Veltroni colonies. The claim was absurd. There was no evidence of any contamination, no specific incident cited, no opportunity for humans to respond or defend themselves. It was simply a demonstration of power. The Veltroni wanted humanity to know that they could strangle human worlds whenever they chose, and there was nothing humanity could do about it. For 3 months, no ships were permitted to enter or leave the Proxima system. Food supplies dwindled. Medical shortages became critical. Children grew sick from malnutrition. Old people died because medications they needed could not reach them. Ambassador Vasquez pleaded with the Concorde to intervene. She presented evidence that the blockade was illegal under interstellar law. She argued that innocent people were dying for no reason. She begged the other species to show basic compassion. The throny high speaker Vithos listened to her arguments with what appeared to be amusement. When she finished, he responded with a single sentence. "The quarantine will be lifted when we are satisfied that the contamination risk has been eliminated." "There is no contamination risk. You invented it. Are you calling the Veltroni Dominion liars, Ambassador?" When Thos's golden eyes gleamed with malice. "That would be a very serious accusation, one that might have consequences for your species." Elenena stood frozen, trapped between truth and survival. If she backed down, the blockade would continue and more people would die. If she pushed forward, she might provoke an even worse response. In the end, she did what humans had always done. She backed down. "I withdraw the accusation," she said, her voice hollow. "I merely request that the Dominion reconsider its position in light of the humanitarian concerns I have raised." Vithos made the grinding rock sound that passed for Veltroni laughter. "Your request is noted. The quarantine will continue." On Proxima Centauri B, Sarah Onquo watched her daughter Grace grow thinner day by day. The food rations were barely enough to keep an adult alive. For a growing child, they were slow starvation. "Mommy," Grace asked one night, her voice weak, "why won't the aliens let the ships come? Don't they know people are hungry?" Sarah held her daughter close, fighting back tears. "They know, baby. They just don't care." "Why not?" "Because," Sarah's voice caught, "because they think we don't matter. Because they think we're too small and too weak to deserve their attention." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Will we always be small and weak?" Sarah thought about the data chip she had received years ago, about the reckoning, about the growing anger she felt every time she saw a child crying from hunger or heard news of another atrocity. The Concorde refused to address. "No, baby," she said. "We won't be small and weak forever. Someday, things will change. Someday the people who hurt us will understand that they made a mistake. When, I don't know, but I promise you it will happen. The people who are hurting us will learn that humans don't forget, and humans don't forgive forever." The blockade lasted 6 months. When it finally lifted, the Veltroni offered no explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of the suffering they had caused. They simply declared that the contamination risk had been resolved and withdrew their ships. The final death toll was never officially released. Estimates range from 10,000 to 30,000. Most were children and elderly, the ones too weak to survive on reduced rations. Ambassador Vasquez's family lived on Proxima. Her daughter Maria, her son-in-law Carlos, her grandchildren Sophia, and little David. They survived the blockade barely, but the experience left scars that would never fully heal. After the blockade ended, Maria sent her mother a message. It was short and bitter. "You told us to be patient. You said that if we just followed the rules, worked through the proper channels, everything would work out. Sophia almost died, Mom. David is still sick. And you're still sitting in that chamber, listening to the creatures who did this to us, pretending that someday they'll change. How long do we have to wait? How many of us have to die before you admit that patience isn't working?" Elenena read the message alone in her quarters. She read it 3 times. Then she put her head in her hands and wept. The next morning, she requested a meeting with Chancellor Park. "I need you to understand something," she told him. "I have spent my entire career believing in diplomacy. I still believe in it, but I am losing faith in this particular diplomatic relationship. The Concorde does not see us as partners. They see us as victims, and victims do not become equals through patience alone. Sometimes victims have to show that they are capable of fighting back. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet. I'm not calling for war. I'm simply saying that we need to prepare for the possibility that war might be unavoidable, and we need to let the galaxy know somehow that our patience has limits. Park considered her words carefully. He had received similar messages from military leaders, from colonial governors, from ordinary citizens who had lost loved ones to the casual cruelty of the older species. I understand, he said finally, and I agree. Something has to change. The question is how to change it without destroying ourselves in the process. Perhaps that question is not ours to answer alone, Elena said. Perhaps it's time to let the galaxy know that we have been considering it. 3 days later, Admiral Marcus Chen addressed the Concord in a rare appearance by a military officer at the diplomatic assembly. His message was simple and direct. For 300 years, humanity has sought peaceful coexistence with the species of this galaxy. We have endured insults, exploitation, and violence. We have filed complaints through proper channels. We have trusted in the processes of this Concord to provide justice. That trust has been repeatedly betrayed. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Most of them seemed bored. A few looked annoyed that a human military officer was daring to address them. I am here to deliver a warning. Human patience is not infinite. Our restraint is not weakness. Our willingness to negotiate is not inability to fight. I urge the members of this Concord to consider carefully how they treat humanity in the coming years. Because if the provocations continue, if the exploitation continues, if the killing continues, there will come a day when we stop asking for justice and start taking it. High Speaker Vithos rose from his platform, his massive form dominating the chamber. Is that a threat, Admiral? Does humanity presume to threaten the Concord? Chen met the Belthrani's gaze without flinching. It is not a threat, High Speaker. It is a promise, and I suggest you remember it. Vathos stared at the human for a long moment. Then he made the grinding sound of throny laughter louder and longer than ever before. Humans threaten like their children cry, he announced to the chamber. Frequently and without consequence. The day we fear humanity is the day the stars themselves fall dark. Laughter echoed through the vast hall. Chen stood silently, enduring it, his face expressionless. When the laughter finally faded, he spoke one last time. Remember this moment, High Speaker. Remember your laughter. Remember your certainty. Because when the day comes that you wish you had listened, you will remember nothing else. He turned and walked out of the chamber, the sound of alien amusement following him all the way to the door. In the darkness beyond Neptune, the secret fleet waited. The Orpheus Protocol observed and learned. And somewhere in the vast machinery of fate, the countdown to humanity's breaking point continued, one insult at a time. The intelligence report arrived on Chancellor Park's desk on a gray Tuesday morning. It came from sources so secret that fewer than 20 people in the entire human government knew they existed. Spies embedded in alien governments, electronic surveillance systems hidden in diplomatic facilities, AI algorithms that monitored and decoded alien communications across hundreds of frequencies. What the report revealed was enough to make Park's blood run cold. The document was titled Terran Containment Accord, Final Implementation Protocols. It had been drafted secretly by the Throny Dominion, the Cathari Syndicate, and the Oravan Collective. Together, these three powers represented the most influential members of the Concord, with the resources and military might to dominate most of known space. The Accord had a simple purpose: to permanently limit human expansion and ensure that humanity would never become a threat to the established order. The document outlined 3 phases. Phase 1 involved economic restrictions, designed to prevent humans from developing advanced technologies. Phase 2 called for strict limits on human population growth and colonial expansion. Phase 3, marked for implementation within the next decade, was the worst of all: forced relocation. All human colonies would be abandoned. All human populations would be moved to a single star system, carefully chosen for its isolation and lack of resources. This system would be monitored by a permanent blockade, ensuring that humans could never again venture into the wider galaxy. It was in effect a plan to imprison the entire human species. Park called an emergency meeting of his most trusted advisors. They gathered in the secure bunker beneath Geneva, their faces pale as they reviewed the document. "This is genocide," said Defense Minister Morrison. Maybe not immediate, but that's what it leads to. Trap us in one system with limited resources and eventually we'll die out. They're not even hiding it. Foreign Minister Lu Wu added, "Look at this section here. They explicitly state that the goal is to manage the human population to sustainable levels. That's code for letting us starve." Admiral Chen's holographic image was grim. The timeline shows that they plan to begin implementation within 5 years. They're already moving ships into position around our major colonies. Park sat silently staring at the document. Everything he had believed, everything he had worked for, felt like ash in his mouth. He had spent his entire life believing that peace was possible, that patience and diplomacy could overcome any obstacle. And now he held proof that the species he had tried so hard to appease were planning to exterminate humanity. "What are our options?" he finally asked. "We can reveal this publicly," Lu suggested. "Show the galaxy what the Velroni and their allies are planning. Try to build sympathy among the other species." "It won't work," Chen said flatly. "The species powerful enough to stop this are the ones planning it. The smaller species don't have the strength to oppose them, even if they wanted to." "Then what do you suggest, Admiral?" Chen was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of decades of frustration. "Sir, I suggest we prepare to activate Project Prometheus. Not immediately, but soon. Very soon." Park closed his eyes. He had always known this moment might come. He had prayed that it wouldn't. But here it was, staring him in the face, demanding a response. "Not yet," he said. "We still need more information. We need to understand exactly what they're planning and when they intend to act." He looked around the table. "But begin quiet preparations. Alert Admiral Jiang Wei in the outer system. Tell her to bring the fleet to full readiness. And if they attack before we're ready, then we respond with everything we have." Park's voice hardened. "But I want to be absolutely certain that we have exhausted every other option. When we act, I want the galaxy to know that we tried everything else first. I want them to understand that they forced our hand." 3 months later, the Velroni made their move. New Eden was humanity's oldest and most beloved colony world. It had been settled in the early days of human expansion, when the dream of spreading among the stars was still fresh and full of hope. Over the centuries, it had grown into a thriving civilization of nearly 50 million people. Its cities were monuments to human creativity. Its universities produced scientists and artists and thinkers who enriched all of human culture. Ambassador Vasquez's family lived on New Eden. Her daughter Maria and son-in-law Carlos had moved there after the blockade of Proxima, seeking a safer place to raise their children. Sophia was 12 now, bright and curious, and dreaming of becoming a starship captain someday. David was 8, quieter than his sister, happier with books than adventures. Elena cherished every message she received from them, every photo of the children growing up, every video of family celebrations. In a life filled with diplomatic disappointments, they were her greatest joy. The Velroni fleet arrived without warning. 30 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in orbit over New Eden, their weapon systems already powered and ready. Commander Thexel, a veteran of 100 military operations, transmitted a single message to the colonial government. The Velt Theroni Dominion has declared this world to be in violation of the Terran containment protocols. All human inhabitants are ordered to prepare for immediate relocation. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. The colonial governor tried to negotiate. She pointed out that no Terran containment protocols had ever been formally announced or agreed to. She asked for time to consult with Earth. She begged for an explanation. The response was brief. "Compliance is not optional. You have 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures. After that, we will proceed with enforcement measures." Word of the ultimatum reached Earth within minutes. Chancellor Park convened another emergency meeting, but there was little they could do. New Eden was too far away for immediate military support. The official fleet was too small to challenge 30th warships. All they could do was watch and wait, and hope that diplomacy would prevail. On New Eden, the hour passed. The colonists did not evacuate. They gathered in the streets of their cities, holding signs and singing songs, peacefully protesting an order they considered unjust. They believed that even the Belthrani would not attack unarmed civilians. They believed that basic decency would prevail. They were wrong. Commander Thexiel observed the demonstrations on his tactical display. The humans filled the plazas and parks of their cities, their voices raised in defiance. To him, they looked like insects swarming around a nest that was about to be destroyed. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are not complying with the evacuation order. Shall we deploy ground forces?" Thiel considered the option briefly. Ground combat would be time-consuming and would result in Belthroni casualties. There was a simpler solution. Negative. Target the largest population centers. Begin orbital bombardment. "Sir, those are civilian targets. The Concord laws. The humans are not full members of the Concord. They do not have protection under Concord law. Execute the order." The first plasma strike hit the capital city at 14:32 local time. The blast vaporized everything within a 3-meter radius. Instantly, buildings, vehicles, people, all ceased to exist in a flash of light and heat. The shockwave spread outward, flattening structures and killing thousands more. 11 seconds later, the second strike hit, then the third, then the fourth. When the bombardment finally stopped, 2.3 million human beings were dead. Among them were Maria and Carlos Vasquez, along with their children, Sophia and David. They had been attending a community gathering in the central plaza when the first blast hit. They never knew what happened on Earth. Chancellor Park watched the destruction on his display screen. The images were transmitted by surviving cameras on the surface, showing the smoking craters where cities had once stood. The audio feed carried the sounds of screaming and weeping, and the crackle of flames consuming everything that remained. He sat in silence for a long time. His advisors spoke around him, their voices rising in shock and anger and grief, but he heard none of it. He was looking at the ruins of everything he had believed in. Patience had not saved those people. Diplomacy had not protected them. Compliance with the rules had not prevented the slaughter. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Ambassador Vasquez. "David," she said, and her voice was the voice of a woman whose soul had been torn in half. "David, my family was there. Maria, Carlos, the children. They're all Carlos. They're all time." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Park felt something shift inside him. It was like a door opening in his mind, a door he had kept locked for his entire life. Behind that door was rage. Pure, cold, terrible rage. The kind of rage that came only when a person realized that everything they had tried to prevent had happened. "Anyway, I know," he said quietly. "I know, Elenena, and I promise you, I promise on my life and my honor and everything I have ever believed, that this will not go unanswered." He ended the call and turned to face his advisors. His expression had changed. The diplomatic calm was gone, replaced by something harder and colder and infinitely more dangerous. "Get me Admiral Chen," he said, "and connect me to Admiral Zhang Wei in the outer system. It's time to activate Prometheus." "Sir," Morrison said cautiously, "are you certain? Once we begin, there's no going back." Park's gaze was steady. 2.3 million people, children, Morrison, families murdered, while they sang songs and held signs and believed that the universe would protect them. There is no going back from that. There is only going forward. 1 hour later, David Park addressed the United Earth Assembly. His speech was broadcast across all human worlds on priority channels. It was also transmitted on every galactic communication frequency, ensuring that every species in the Concord would hear what he had to say. He stood at the podium in Geneva, wearing a simple black suit. There was no script, no teleprompter, no prepared remarks. He spoke from memory and from the heart. For 300 years, humanity has sought peace with the species of this galaxy. We asked only to be treated with basic dignity. We offered friendship and cooperation. We followed every rule, obeyed every protocol, accepted every insult and injury in the hope that patience would eventually be rewarded. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives and the cameras that carried his words to the stars. Today, 2.3 million of our people were murdered. They were not soldiers. They were not warriors. They were families, children, old people who had worked their whole lives and deserved to rest in peace. They were killed because they existed, because they were human, Because the throny Dominion decided that our species does not deserve to live. His voice remained calm, almost conversational, which made the words even more chilling. We file complaints through proper channels. We trusted the Concord to provide justice. We believed that if we simply followed the rules, everything would work out. He shook his head slowly. We were fools. The Concord has no interest in justice for humanity. The Concord exists to protect the powerful from the consequences of their actions. And today that ends. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. For centuries, you have mistaken our patience for weakness. You have confused our mercy with inability. You have convinced yourselves that humans are harmless, that we can be exploited without consequence, that we will endure any abuse rather than fight back. His voice dropped lower, becoming almost a whisper. You were wrong. You were so terribly, tragically wrong, and now you will learn the truth that our own history should have taught you. He straightened, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated grievance. There is nothing in this universe more dangerous than a human being who has stopped hoping for peace. We gave you every chance. We tried everything else first. Remember that. Remember that we tried to be your friends, and you chose to be our enemies. He took a breath. I am authorizing the activation of the Prometheus Directive. Every human vessel, every human world, every human being is now operating under a single command: defend humanity by whatever means necessary. The time for patience is over. The time for diplomacy is over. The time for hoping that our tormentors will change their ways is over. He looked directly into the camera, speaking to every alien watching across the galaxy. You have 300 years of crimes to answer for. And I promise you this: humanity will collect every debt. He stepped away from the podium. The broadcast ended. In the darkness beyond Neptune, Admiral Jiang Wei received the activation order she had been waiting for her entire life. She had always known this day would come. Part of her had hoped it never would. But now that it was here, she felt no hesitation, no doubt, no fear. All ships, she commanded. Bring reactors to full power. Charge all weapon systems. Prepare for faster-than-light jump on my mark. Across the hidden construction yards, 14,000 warships came alive. Their engines flared with power. Their weapon systems hummed with barely contained destruction. Their crews, trained in secret for generations, took their stations with the calm efficiency of professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we are receiving a signal from the Orpheus Protocol. The system has completed its final analysis. It is ready to provide tactical support for all combat operations. Jiang Wei nodded. Activate Orpheus. Full integration with all fleet systems. A new voice spoke through the command center speakers. It was calm and measured, neither male nor female, carrying the quiet confidence of an intelligence that had been preparing for this moment for 200 years. This is Orpheus integration complete. I have analyzed all available data on enemy forces, tactics, and psychology. Tactical recommendations are available upon request. Probability of achieving all primary objectives with current assets, 97.3%. What are our primary objectives? Objective 1. Neutralize ally military assets currently engaged in operations against human populations. Objective 2. Secure all human colony worlds against further attack. Objective 3. Demonstrate to all potential aggressors that attacks on humanity will result in unacceptable consequences. And the secondary objectives. Orpheus paused for a fraction of a second, an eternity for an AI of its capabilities before responding. Secondary objectives are at the Chancellor's discretion. However, I calculate that maximum deterrent effect will be achieved through the complete military neutralization of the Velroni Dominion, the Cathari Syndicate, and the Oravon Collective. Shall I prepare operational plans for these contingencies? Jengi looked at the tactical display showing the disposition of enemy forces throughout the galaxy. The Velthroni fleet at New Eden, the Cathari warships patrolling human trade routes, the Oran research vessels that had caused so much suffering to human children. Yes, she said. Prepare for all contingencies. Today, the galaxy learns what happens when humanity stops being patient. She turned to her navigation officer. Set course for New Eden. We have a massacre to answer for. In orbit over New Eden, Commander Thexol was supervising the cleanup operation. Ground forces had been deployed to round up survivors and prepare them for relocation. The work was proceeding smoothly, and Thexol was already drafting his report to High Command when his tactical officer interrupted with an urgent alert. "Commander, we are detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures. Incoming vessels, unknown class and configuration. How many?" The tactical officer's voice trembled. "Sensors are still counting, Commander. Current estimate is over 14,000 contacts." The scales turned a shade paler. "That's impossible. The humans don't have 14,000 ships. They barely have 2,000. These are not standard human vessels, Commander. They appear to be a completely new class of warship. Our databases have no records of this design." The display screens filled with points of light as the hidden fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. They formed a sphere around the planet, completely surrounding the Velroni squadron with overwhelming force. A communication channel opened. A human face appeared on the screen. Admiral Marcus Chen recalled from retirement to command the fleet's forward elements. "Commander Thexol," Chen said. His voice was calm and cold. "I told your High Speaker to remember this day. I told him to remember his laughter. I wonder if he's laughing now." Thiel stared at the tactical display, at the thousands upon thousands of human ships, at weapons readings that made his blood run cold. The power output alone was staggering, far beyond anything the Velroni fleet could match. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How did you build all of this? You had 300 years to learn that underestimating humanity was a mistake. You chose to spend that time mocking us instead." Chen's expression didn't change. "Now you will learn the lesson the hard way. We have 30 ships here. You don't need this many vessels to defeat us." "You're right. We don't. But this isn't about defeating you, Commander. This is about sending a message. This is about making sure that everyone in the galaxy sees what happens when humanity's patience finally runs out." Chen paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 2.3 million dead. "For New Eden, for every human you murdered, for every child who will never grow up, for Maria and Carlos and Sofia and David Vasquez, this is for them." The human fleet opened fire. 19 minutes later, there were Velroni ships left in orbit over New Eden. The debris field would take months to clear. Commander Thexol's last transmission to Velroni High Command was 2 words. Sent in the final seconds before his flagship disintegrated, they waited. Across the galaxy, alien species watched the battle recordings with growing horror. The Cathari Syndicate immediately ordered their fleet to return to home space. The Oravan Collective began evacuating their research facilities near human territory. Smaller species that had ignored or exploited humanity for centuries suddenly discovered urgent reasons to reconsider their positions. In the Great Hall of the Concord, High Speaker Vithos watched the destruction of his fleet with an expression that might have been disbelief. The humans he had dismissed as crying children, the species he had laughed at and mocked, they had been hiding this power for 200 years, waiting, enduring every insult and injury, while quietly building the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. And now that power had been unleashed. Vuthos remembered Admiral Chen's words at the last Concord session. He remembered his own laughter, his certainty that humans were incapable of real threat. He was not laughing now. The door to his private chamber opened, and an aide rushed in with an urgent message. "High Speaker, the human fleet is moving. They're not stopping at New Eden. They're heading for our core systems." Futhos felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. Pure primal fear of a predator that had finally decided to stop being prey. "Send word to all Velroni forces," he commanded. "Full mobilization. Prepare to defend the homeworld." But even as he gave the order, he knew it would not be enough. The humans had been watching them for 200 years, learning their tactics, analyzing their weaknesses, preparing for exactly this moment. They had been so patient, so very, very patient. And now the galaxy was about to learn the price of taking that patience for granted. The Belthrani Dominion had ruled their portion of the galaxy for 30,000 years. They had built an empire across 1,000 worlds, commanding fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands, and armies that could darken the skies of any planet they chose to conquer. They had never known defeat. They had never experienced fear. They believed with absolute certainty that no force in the universe could threaten their supremacy. That certainty died in the first 48 hours of the war. Admiral Jiang Wei commanded the main human fleet from her flagship, the Yue's Nemesis. She had spent 40 years preparing for this moment, studying every aspect of throny military doctrine, every strength and weakness of their ships and weapons, every flaw in their command structure. The Orpheus Protocol had confirmed and expanded her understanding 1,000-fold. The Velroni fight, the way they have always fought, she explained to her officers during the first strategic briefing. They rely on overwhelming force and predictable tactics. They cannot imagine an enemy that thinks differently than they do. This is their greatest weakness, and we will exploit it mercilessly. The first major engagement took place at the Velthroni forward base of Catherine Station. The Velthroni commander there, Admiral Vexthal, had assembled 300 warships to stop the human advance. It was a force that would have overwhelmed any known fleet in the galaxy. The human fleet that arrived numbered only 50 ships. The Velthroni sensors showed them clearly. 50 vessels against 300. Vexthal allowed himself to feel contempt. The humans were either desperate or stupid. All ships attack formation, he commanded. Destroy them. The Phrony fleet surged forward in the classic assault pattern their species had used for millennia. It was a wall of fire and steel, designed to crush any opposition through sheer weight of numbers. Against any conventional enemy, it would have been devastatingly effective. But the humans were not conventional. The 50 human ships did not attempt to engage directly. Instead, they scattered in a complex pattern that seemed random, but was actually calculated by the Orpheus Protocol to exploit every gap in the Velthroni formation. As the Velthroni pursued, the human ships led them deeper into a carefully prepared kill zone. Now, Jengi said, and 400 additional human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel behind the Velroni fleet, catching them in a perfect crossfire. The battle lasted less than an hour. The Velroni lost 237 ships. The humans lost 3. Exile survived long enough to transmit a desperate warning to High Command. They knew our tactics. They predicted our every move. It's like they can see inside our minds. He was not far from the truth. The news of Catherine's station spread through space like wildfire. For the first time in their history, Throny military commanders began to experience doubt. Their confidence wavered. Their legendary discipline started to crack. Orpheus had predicted this would happen. Throny psychology was built on certainty. Certainty of their own superiority. Certainty that they could not be defeated. Take away that certainty, and the entire structure of their military thinking began to collapse. They are not accustomed to losing, Orpheus explained during the next strategy session. Each defeat damages their morale far more than equivalent losses would damage a species with more experience of setbacks. I recommend we prioritize rapid, decisive victories over territorial gains. The psychological impact will be more valuable than any strategic position. Zheng Wei nodded. How long until their command structure becomes non-functional? At the current rate of psychological degradation, I estimate 17 days until coordination between their fleet elements becomes critically impaired. We can accelerate this timeline by targeting high-profile commanders and symbolic positions. Do it. The human fleet moved through space like a storm. They did not conquer worlds or occupy territories. They simply destroyed everything the Velroni believed made them invincible. Fleet bases that had stood for millennia were reduced to debris in hours. Command ships that had led armadas were hunted down and eliminated with surgical precision. Famous admirals who had never known defeat died in their command chairs, unable to understand how the humans anticipated their every decision. In just 3 weeks, the Velroni lost over 8,000 warships. Human losses totaled fewer than 200. On the Velthroni homeworld, panic began to set in. Citizens who had grown up believing their empire was eternal now watch recordings of their proudest warships being torn apart by enemies they had been taught to despise. The government tried to suppress the information, but it spread anyway, through unofficial channels and frightened whispers. High Speaker Vithos convened an emergency meeting of the Dominion's ruling council. The chamber that normally rang with confident proclamations was silent, except for the heavy breathing of terrified officials. "We must sue for peace," said one council member, an elderly named Theoxora. The humans have clearly demonstrated military capabilities we did not know they possessed. Continuing this war will only lead to our destruction. Peace, Vithos snarled. You suggest we surrender to creatures we have dominated for 3 centuries? I suggest we survive, which is more than we will do if we continue fighting. Before Bethos could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber with urgent news. High Speaker, we have received a communication from the human government. Chancellor Park wishes to speak with you directly. Vuthos's scales shifted colors, betraying his uncertainty. He had expected the humans to continue their attack until the Dominion was completely destroyed. A communication suggested they might be willing to negotiate. Put him through, Vuthos ordered. Chancellor Park's face appeared on the main screen. He looked older than his official portraits, his eyes heavy with grief and exhaustion, but his voice was steady. High Speaker Vithos, I believe we need to have a conversation. You have made your point, human. Your military demonstration has been impressive. What are your terms for peace? Park shook his head slowly. You misunderstand me, High Speaker. I am not offering peace. I am telling you what happens next. Vithos felt a chill run through him. Explain yourself. The Velrani Dominion, the Cathari Syndicate, and the Aruravan Collective conspired to imprison and eventually exterminate my species. The Velthrani military murdered 2.3 million of my people, including children who had done nothing wrong. For these crimes, there will be a reckoning. What kind of reckoning? First, I require the complete surrender of all military forces currently engaged against humanity. Second, I require the dissolution of the Terran Containment Accord and any similar agreements. Third, I require that all individuals responsible for crimes against humanity be surrendered to stand trial. Vithos's voice rose in outrage. You expect us to hand over our own people to be judged by humans? Yes, that is exactly what I expect. Park's expression did not change. You have 1 week to comply. After that, we resume military operations. And High Speaker, we will not stop until every guilty party answers for what they have done. Even if that means destroying every ship, every base, and every government building in the Dominion, you would not dare. The other species would never permit. The other species are not in a position to permit or forbid anything. The Cathari Syndicate has already surrendered. Their entire corporate fleet laid down arms 2 days ago, rather than face destruction. The Aura Collective is evacuating their leadership as we speak. As for the rest of the conquered, Park allowed himself a cold smile. They are watching very carefully to see what happens to those who made humanity their enemy. I suggest you give them a lesson worth remembering. The transmission ended. Vithos stood in silence for a long moment. Around him, the council members waited, their fear almost visible in the air. High Speaker, Thex Theora said quietly. We must consider the possibility that resistance is no longer viable. The alternative is, I know what the alternative is. Bethos's voice was hollow. I know what we must do. The surrender of the Throny Dominion was broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in 30,000 years, the most powerful military force in known space admitted defeat. The images of Veltrani warships powering down their weapons and opening their hangars for human inspection sent shockwaves through every species that witnessed them. Meanwhile, the other members of the Terran Containment Accord fared little better. The Cathari Syndicate, for all its wealth and influence, had no stomach for war. Their society was built on profit, not honor. And the calculation was simple. Fighting humanity would cost more than surrendering. Within a week of the first human offensive, the Syndicate's ruling houses had agreed to cease all hostile operations and pay massive reparations to the species they had exploited. Syndicate Representative Chixai, who had once spoken so confidently about humanity's role as servants, was arrested by her own people and handed over to human authorities. She would be among the first defendants in the war crimes tribunals that followed. The Auravan Collective attempted to flee. Their leaders loaded themselves onto fast ships and scattered in every direction, hoping to escape to neutral space where the humans could not reach them. They did not understand what they were dealing with. The Orpheus Protocol had been tracking Orun leadership movements for decades. It knew their escape routes before they did. Human ships were waiting at every destination, ready to accept the surrender of frightened officials who had nowhere else to run. Captain James Reyes, The officer who had resigned in protest years earlier had been recalled to active duty and given command of a frigate called the UES Justice. His first mission was to enter Orevan home space and deliver a message. He arrived alone, his single ship facing an entire planet's worth of orbital defenses. The Orevan commanders watched him approach on their screens, uncertain what to make of this seemingly suicidal act. Reyes opened a communication channel. "This is Captain James Reyes, of the United Earth Ship Justice. I carry a message from humanity to the Orevan Collective." "One ship," an Orevan commander responded. "You come to threaten us with one ship. I don't need more than one ship." Reyes smiled without warmth. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to demonstrate." Over the next 3 hours, the Justice systematically disabled every orbital defense platform around the Orevan homeworld. Reyes did not destroy them. He simply rendered them useless, shutting down their power systems and weapons with surgical strikes that caused no casualties, but left no doubt about human capabilities. When he finished, he sent another message. "Your defenses were designed by the best military minds your species has produced. The Orpheus Protocol analyzed them in 17 seconds and developed countermeasures in 12. This is what we could do to you at any time, without warning, without your permission, and without any possibility of resistance. Humanity has decided not to destroy the Orevan Collective. But if you give us reason to reconsider that decision, we can change our minds very quickly." The Orevan surrendered the next day. In the Great Hall of the Concord, now mostly empty, as many species had fled or locked themselves in their diplomatic quarters, the remaining representatives gathered to hear humanity's demands. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central platform. She had requested this assignment personally. It was, she said, something she needed to do. For 300 years, humanity asked this conquered for justice. We came to you with evidence of crimes. We pleaded for intervention. We trusted that the systems you had built would protect all species equally. Her voice was steady, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. You ignored us. You mocked us. You told us that our suffering was not important enough to warrant your attention. She paused, looking around at the alien faces watching her. My daughter died on New Eden. My son-in-law. My grandchildren. Sophia was 12 years old. She wanted to be a starship captain. David was 8. He loved to read. They are gone now, vaporized by Velroni weapons. While this Concord did nothing, several representatives shifted uncomfortably. A few tried to look away. I could hate you all. Part of me does, but humanity has not come here for revenge. We have come for accountability. We want the galaxy to acknowledge what was done to us. We want those responsible to face justice. And we want guarantees that this will never happen again to any species. She activated a display showing the long list of grievances humanity had filed over 3 centuries. The complaints about pirate attacks, the petitions against economic exploitation, the protests against the blockade of Proxima, the desperate pleas for help that had all been rejected or ignored. This is the price of your indifference. Every item on this list represents human lives lost or damaged because you chose to look away. We will read this entire list into the official record. Every name, every incident, every crime that the Concord refused to address. It will take 4 days to complete. The reading took 4 days as promised. For 4 days, delegates from across the galaxy sat and listened as human representatives recited 300 years of accumulated wrongs. Some species left in shame. Others remained, their expressions haunted by the weight of what they were hearing. When the reading finally concluded, Elenina spoke again. We are not asking for empire. We are not seeking to dominate or destroy. We want only what we always wanted: to live in peace, to be treated with dignity, and to know that our children can grow up without fear. Is that really so much to ask? No one answered. No one could. The tribunals began 2 months later. Commander Thexol was tried first, charged with a massacre of 2.3 million civilians on New Eden. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Sensor recordings, communication logs, and his own tactical reports showing that he had ordered the bombardment, knowing full well that his targets were populated civilian centers. His defense was simple. He had been following orders. The Terran Containment Accord had been approved at the highest levels of the Velroni government. He was merely implementing policy. The tribunal rejected this defense. Following orders, the lead judge declared, "Has never been an acceptable excuse for genocide." The Velroni people have heard this argument before in their own history. They should know better. Thexal was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on a human penal colony. He would spend his remaining years surrounded by the species he had tried to exterminate, dependent on their mercy for his survival. High Speaker Vithos faced his own trial shortly afterward. The charges against him were even more extensive: planning and authorizing the Terran Containment Accord, approving the use of military force against civilian populations, and 30 counts of what the tribunal termed species-level crimes against humanity. During the trial, Vithos was shown recordings of his own statements over the years, his mockery of human diplomats, his laughter at Admiral Chen's warning, his casual dismissal of human lives as unimportant. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" the lead judge asked. Vithos was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "We didn't know. We looked at humanity and saw a young species, weak and easily manipulated. We didn't understand what we were dealing with. We didn't know that your patience was not the same as your inability. We didn't know that you were watching us, learning about us, preparing for the day when we would push you too far." He looked up at the human judges at the gallery, filled with humans who had lost family members to Velroni aggression. "We were arrogant, we were cruel, and we were fools. I do not ask for mercy. I know I do not deserve it. I ask only that you remember this. We did not hate humanity. We simply did not care enough to treat you as equals. That indifference was our greatest crime, and it is the crime for which I most deserve punishment." He was found guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment, with no possibility of release. Similar trials followed for Cathari executives, Orovon researchers, and officials from a dozen other species who had participated in crimes against humanity. Each trial was broadcast across the galaxy, ensuring that everyone saw the consequences of treating humans as prey. But not all of humanity's responses were punitive. Captain Reyes, now commanding the flagship UES Prometheus, led a humanitarian mission to Throny civilian populations that had been cut off from supplies during the war. Human ships delivered food, medicine, and emergency aid to people whose only crime was being born in a nation that had made terrible choices. "They're the enemy," one of his officers protested. "Why are we helping them?" "Because we're better than they were," Reyes replied. "Because if we let civilians starve to punish their government, we become the kind of monsters we fought against. And because someday, when this is all over, we're going to have to share this galaxy with them. Better to start that relationship with generosity than with cruelty." Dr. Sarah Okonkwo was appointed to lead a new oversight commission responsible for preventing future abuses. Her daughter Grace, now a teenager, helped compile the evidence that would be used to establish universal standards for the treatment of all species. "Mom," Grace asked one evening, "do you think they'll ever really change? The Velroni, the others, do you think they'll ever see us as equals?" Sarah thought about the question carefully before answering. "I think change takes time. The older species have believed they were superior for thousands of years. They won't give up that belief overnight." She put her arm around her daughter. "But every time they look at a human now, they'll remember what happened when they underestimated us. They'll remember that we could have destroyed them and chose not to. That's the beginning of respect. The rest will come eventually. What if it doesn't? Then we'll keep working at it. We'll keep being the better example. We'll keep showing them that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty, and that power is measured by how you treat those weaker than yourself." Grace nodded slowly. "That sounds hard. It is hard. Being good is always harder than being powerful. But it's the only path that leads anywhere worth going." In the halls of the Conquered, now renamed the Galactic Assembly, humanity took its place as a full and equal member. Other species made room for them, some willingly and some with barely concealed resentment. But all of them understood that the universe had changed forever. The humans who had been dismissed as children were now recognized as one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. The fleet that had been hidden for 200 years remained in service, a silent reminder that patience could run out again if necessary. But the humans did not use their power to dominate. They voted for fair trade agreements. They supported aid programs for struggling species. They proposed reforms that would prevent any government from treating others the way humanity had been treated, and when other species asked why humanity was being so generous, after everything that had been done to them, the answer was always the same. Because we remember what it was like to be weak. Because we know how it feels to be ignored and exploited, and treated as less than nothing. And because we never want any species to experience what we experienced. The galaxy was still learning to understand humanity. The lesson would take generations to complete, but it was a lesson that no species would ever forget. 1 year had passed since the guns fell silent. 1 year since the tribunals concluded and the verdicts were delivered. 1 year since the galaxy began the slow process of learning to live with the humanity it had underestimated for 3 centuries. The changes were visible everywhere. The Galactic Concord had been dissolved, its charter torn up, and its institutions disbanded. In its place stood the Galactic Assembly, a new organization built on principles that the old Concord had claimed to embrace, but never actually practiced. Every species had equal voting rights regardless of their age or military power. Disputes were resolved through binding arbitration, with real enforcement mechanisms, and a new court system had been established to try crimes against any species, with judges drawn from across the galaxy to ensure fairness. Humanity held a permanent seat on the Assembly's Executive Council, along with veto power over any resolution affecting core security matters. Some species grumbled about this arrangement, arguing that it gave humans too much influence. The response was always the same. Humanity had earned that influence through 3 centuries of patience, followed by a demonstration of power that no one wanted to see repeated. Chancellor David Park stood in his office in Geneva, looking out at a city that had become the diplomatic capital of the galaxy. Alien vessels filled the skies now, bringing representatives from dozens of species to negotiate, trade, and simply meet the humans they had ignored for so long. His aide entered with a data tablet. "Sir, the final reports from the reconstruction effort on New Eden." Park took the tablet and reviewed its contents. The numbers were encouraging. The cities destroyed by the Velroni bombardment were being rebuilt, better than before. Memorials had been constructed in every major settlement, honoring the 2.3 million who had died, and a new population was arriving. Families from across human space who wanted to help restore the colony that had come to symbolize human resilience. "How many sellers arrived this month?" 12,000, sir. We're getting applications from all over. People want to be part of rebuilding." Park nodded. "Good. Keep me updated." After his aide left, Park returned to the window. His reflection stared back at him, older and more tired than he had been a year ago. The weight of everything that had happened showed in the lines of his face and the gray in his hair. He had not wanted to go to war. He had spent his entire life believing that violence solved nothing. But when his people were murdered, when his diplomats were mocked, when the powers of the galaxy conspired to imprison humanity forever, he had made the only choice he could make. He did not regret it, but he would carry the burden of it for the rest of his life. A communication signal chimed. He answered it, and found Admiral Marcus Chen on the screen, calling from his retirement home on Mars. "Chancellor, how are you holding up?" "Surviving, Admiral. You the same." Chen's expression was thoughtful. "I've been thinking about something. Something that bothers me." "What's that?" "We won. We beat them so badly that they'll never forget it. But I keep wondering, did we do the right thing? We showed the galaxy that we're capable of terrible violence. We made them fear us. Is that really what we wanted?" Park considered the question carefully before answering. "I think about that too. Every day." He paused. "I don't know if we did the right thing. I only know that we did the necessary thing. The galaxy would never have treated us fairly, as long as they believe we were weak. Now they know we're not weak. What happens next depends on what we do with that knowledge. And what will we do? We'll try to be better than they were. We'll try to build something that works for everyone, not just the powerful. And we'll hope that's enough." Chen nodded slowly. "I hope so too, for all our sakes." Far from Earth on the Velroni homeworld, a different kind of rebuilding was taking place. The Dominion had been reduced to a fraction of its former size. Only 3 star systems remained under Throny control, each one monitored by human observation stations that ensured compliance with the peace terms. The great fleets that had once commanded fear across the galaxy were gone, their ships either destroyed or decommissioned. The proud empire that had ruled for 30,000 years was now dependent on the mercy of the species it had tried to exterminate. For many, this was a humiliation beyond endurance. They retreated into bitterness and resentment, cursing the humans and dreaming of revenge. But others began to ask uncomfortable questions. In a school on the outskirts of the throny capital, a young student named Vex Thora sat in a history class, listening to a lecture about the recent war. The teacher was explaining the official version. Humanity had launched an unprovoked attack, using hidden weapons developed in violation of galactic law. The Dominion had been defeated only through treachery and deceit. Vex Thor raised her hand. "Teacher, I have a question." "Yes. If humans are so evil and treacherous, why are they sending food to our cities? Why are they helping us rebuild our hospitals? The ships that bring aid have human crews. I've seen them." The teacher's expression hardened. "Those are propaganda efforts. The humans want to confuse us, to make us forget what they did. But what did they do? I mean, before the war, what did we do to them first?" The silence in the classroom stretched for a long moment. The teacher seemed uncertain how to respond. "That is not relevant to today's lesson," he finally said. "Please pay attention to the approved curriculum." But Vextora could see that she was not the only student with questions. All around her, young Velroni were exchanging glances, silently, acknowledging what the older generation refused to admit. Something had gone wrong, and it had not started with humanity. After class, Vexus Thora went to the library and began searching for information about the war. The official sources repeated the same propaganda she had heard in class. But there were other sources, human broadcasts, neutral species reports, testimony from the tribunals that told a very different story. She read about the massacre at Kepler 442 dB, about the blockade of Proxima, about the Terran Containment Accord and its plan to imprison humanity forever. She read about 3 centuries of insults and exploitation, blood and cans, filed complaints, and ignored protests. Patience tested again and again until it finally broke. When she finished, she sat in silence for a long time, trying to process what she had learned. The humans had not started this war. The Thrani had, and not just by attacking New Eden by 300 years of casual cruelty that had convinced humanity there was no other choice. Vexthora thought about her grandparents, who spoke of the old days with pride. She thought about her parents, who had accepted the official story without question, and she thought about her own generation, growing up in the shadow of defeat, wondering how the mighty Dominion had fallen so far. Maybe she thought the fall had started long before the war. Maybe it had started the moment the Velthroni decided that some species were worth less than others. She began to write, not for publication, not for any audience except herself. She simply needed to put her thoughts into words. We were taught that we were superior. We were taught that the younger species existed to serve us. We were taught that strength was measured by the ability to take what we wanted without consequence. We were wrong. Strength is not about taking. It is about choosing what to give. The humans showed us this, not through their weapons, but through their restraint. They could have destroyed us. They chose not to. That is true strength. And until we learn to practice it ourselves, we will never be worthy of the respect we once demanded. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in schools and homes and government chambers. The war had shattered assumptions that had stood for millennia. Species that had never questioned their place in the hierarchy were suddenly forced to reconsider everything they believed. The humans had not just won a military victory. They had challenged the fundamental way the galaxy organized itself. And that challenge would echo for generations to come. On New Eden, the memorial to the 2.3 million dead stood at the center of the capital's main plaza. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone bearing the names of every victim, arranged not by importance or status, but by the random chance of alphabetical order. A senator's name appeared next to a farmer's, a scientist next to a child's. In death, all were equal. Admiral Chen had retired there, as he had planned. He spent his days helping with the reconstruction effort, his nights sitting by the memorial and remembering everyone he had lost over his long career. One evening, he was joined by Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She had stepped down from her diplomatic post after the war, unable to continue representing humanity to species she could no longer pretend to trust. Now she lived quietly on New Eden, near the spot where her daughter and grandchildren had died. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the rebuilt city. "Do you think it was worth it?" Elena finally asked. "Everything we went through, everything we sacrificed, was it worth it?" Chen thought about the question for a long time before answering. "I don't know if worth it is the right way to think about it. Nothing can bring back the people we lost. No victory can heal the wounds we carry." He paused. "But I think we created something that didn't exist before. A chance for real change. A possibility that the galaxy can become better than it was. And if it doesn't, if they go back to treating us the way they did before, they won't. They can't. We made sure of that." Chen's expression was calm but firm. "The fleet is still out there. The Orpheus Protocol is still active. If the galaxy forgets the lesson we taught them, we can remind them. But I don't think we'll have to. I think most species genuinely understand now that treating others as inferior is dangerous. Not just because the victims might fight back, but because it corrupts the species doing the mistreating." Elena nodded slowly. "I hope you're right. I want to believe that this made a difference. That Sophia and David and all the others didn't die for nothing. They didn't. I promise you that." Chen reached over and took her hand. "The galaxy will never be the same, because of what happened here. And your grandchildren are part of that legacy. Their names are on this wall, and every species in known space knows what that wall represents. They will be remembered forever." Elena looked at the memorial, at the thousands of names carved into the stone. She thought about Sophia, who had wanted to be a starship captain, about David, who had loved his books, about Maria and Carlos, who had built a life together and lost it in an instant of alien cruelty. "Forever," she repeated softly. "Yes, I suppose that's something." They sat together until the stars came out. Two old soldiers keeping vigil over the dead. Doctor for me. Newer Sarah Okonkwo's office at the Galactic Standards Commission was filled with paperwork. Every day brought new cases, new complaints, new species struggling to adapt to a galaxy where the rules had suddenly changed. She was reviewing a report on Orovon compliance when Grace knocked on her door. "Mom, you have a visitor." Sarah looked up surprised. She didn't have any appointments scheduled. "Who is it?" "Avalthrone. He says his name is Theano. He's the nephew of Commander Thexal." Sarah's expression hardened. Thexal was the officer who had ordered the bombardment of New Eden, the man responsible for 2.3 million deaths, now serving a life sentence on a human prison world. Why would his nephew want to see me? "He says he wants to apologize on behalf of his family." Sarah considered refusing. The wounds from the war were still fresh, and she had no desire to relive them by meeting with relatives of war criminals. But something made her pause. "Send him in." Thiel was young by Throne standards, barely a century old. He entered the office with his scales dulled, a sign of shame and submission in his species. His eyes were fixed on the floor. "Dr. Okonkwo," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me. I know I have no right to ask for your time." "You don't? So why are you here?" Thiel finally looked up and Sarah saw something she had not expected. Genuine grief. "I came to say that I am sorry. Not because I expect forgiveness. I know that is not possible, but because someone needed to say it. My uncle did terrible things. My family supported him. My species created the conditions that made those things possible. None of that is acceptable. None of it can be undone. But I wanted you to know that some of us understand that. Some of us are trying to be different." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "Words are easy. Thexanol. What are you actually doing to be different?" "I teach now at a school on my homeworld. I teach young Threni the truth about what we did. Not the propaganda, but the real history. The children are angry when they learn it. They feel betrayed by their own culture. But they need to know. They need to understand so they can make better choices than their ancestors did. That's dangerous work. Your government doesn't approve of that kind of teaching. No, they have tried to stop me several times. But I keep going, because if we don't face what we were, we can never become what we should be." Sarah felt something shift in her heart. She had spent years hating the Belthrani. and with good reason. But hatred was exhausting, and it changed nothing. Here was a young alien trying to break the cycle of cruelty that had defined his species for millennia. Maybe that was worth something. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want to learn. I want to understand humans better so I can teach my students more accurately. I want to know what humanity values, what you believe in, what makes you willing to be patient for so long, and then capable of such terrible violence when patience runs out." "You want to understand humanity?" "Yes." Sarah thought about the question. It was in a way the question that every species was now asking. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do. Now they wanted to know why. "Humans believe that every person matters," she said slowly. "Every life has value regardless of species or age or status. We don't always live up to that belief, but it's at the core of who we are. When you attacked New Eden, you weren't just killing individuals. You were attacking that fundamental belief. You were saying that human lives didn't matter. That's why we responded the way we did. Not because we wanted revenge, but because we couldn't accept a universe where that belief was wrong." Theo listened intently. "And now after the war, do you still believe that every life has value? Even Belthrani lives." "Yes, even Belthrani lives." Sarah met his eyes. "That's why we're helping your people rebuild. That's why we sent food and medicine to your civilian populations. That's why your uncle is in prison instead of dead. Because if we abandoned our beliefs whenever they became inconvenient, they wouldn't really be beliefs at all." Texanel was quiet for a moment. Then he bowed, a gesture of deep respect. "Thank you, Dr. Okonkwo. I will try to teach my students what you have taught me. See that you do, and Thiexanol. Yes, tell them about Grace, my daughter. She almost died during the blockade of Proxima before the war. Tell them that a human child nearly starved because the Velroni wanted to demonstrate their power. And tell them that the same child is now working to build a galaxy where no other children will suffer the same way. That's the difference between taking and giving. That's what strength really looks like." The nodded and left, carrying with him the seeds of understanding that might one day grow into something new. Years passed. The galaxy continued to change. The Throny Dominion, reduced and humbled, began to transform from within. A new generation grew up questioning the assumptions of their ancestors. Reform movements gained power. Eventually, a democratic government replaced the old imperial system, and the Velroni applied for full membership in the Galactic Assembly as equals, not masters. The Cathari Syndicate reinvented itself as a legitimate trading organization, abandoning the predatory practices that had defined it for millennia. Some of its former executives became advocates for fair commerce, using their expertise to help smaller species avoid exploitation. The Oruravan Collective established new ethical guidelines for research with human representatives serving on every oversight committee. The scientists who had once treated other species as subjects for experimentation now worked alongside them as partners. And humanity continued to grow, to explore, to build. The hidden fleet remained in the asteroid fields, a silent reminder of what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. But no one expected it to be needed again. The lesson had been learned too well for that. On Earth, in the rebuilt United Nations Memorial Garden, a new monument stood beside the old ones. It bore an inscription in every known galactic language. "We waited 300 years. We will wait 300 more, but we will never wait forever." Diplomatic vessels arrived daily now, bringing representatives from species that had once ignored humanity's existence. They came with gifts and apologies and genuine offers of friendship. They came to learn, to trade, to build relationships that their ancestors would never have imagined. And humanity welcomed them all, not because they had forgotten the past. They would never forget. The memorial on New Eden stood forever, bearing the names of 2.3 million dead. The recordings of the war played in history classes across human space. The stories of patience and suffering and eventual triumph were passed from generation to generation. But humans understood something that the older species were only beginning to learn. Vengeance was easy, forgiveness was hard, and building a better future required letting go of enough of the past to make room for change. On a rebuilt plaza in the capital of New Eden, a young Velthroni student stood before the memorial wall, reading the names carved into the stone. She was Vexthera, now grown, now a teacher herself, now leading a group of students on a field trip to understand what their ancestors had done. These were people, she told her students, not enemies, not obstacles, not resources to be exploited. People with families and dreams and the right to live in peace. Our grandparents forgot that. They decided that some lives were worth less than others, and because of that decision, all of these people died. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The humans could have destroyed us for what we did. They had every right, every weapon, every justification. Instead, they demanded that we become better. They believed we could change, even after everything we had done to them. She looked around at her students, young Velroni, who would grow up in a galaxy very different from the one their ancestors had known. Maybe that is the most terrifying thing about humans. They never wanted to be our enemies. They simply refused in the end to remain our victims. A human teacher approached, leading her own group of students. The two groups looked at each other, former enemies, now fellow travelers in a changed universe. "Would you like to join us?" the human teacher asked. "We're about to tell the story of what happened here. It's good to hear it too, so everyone remembers." Vexthora nodded. "Yes, I think that would be good." The two groups merged, human and Thermoni children standing side by side before the wall of names, and together they listened to the story of how the galaxy had learned at terrible cost the price of underestimating humanity. The story ended with a question that every generation would ask, from now until the stars themselves grew dark. What does it take to build a better universe? The answer humanity had discovered was patience. Not the passive patience of those who wait because they have no other choice, but the active patience of those who work and build and endure because they believe that tomorrow can be better than today. Humanity had waited 300 years for the galaxy to accept them. Now, they would wait as long as it took for the galaxy to become what it should have been all along. And if anyone asked whether humanity would ever run out of patience again, the answer was always the same. We will wait. We will hope. We will work for something better. But we will never forget what we are capable of when patience fails, and neither will anyone else. The monument stood in the memorial garden, its message carved in stone for all eternity. We waited 300 years. We will wait 300 more. But we will never wait forever. Every species in the galaxy knew those words now. Every child learned them in school. Every diplomat remembered them in negotiations. Every military commander kept them in mind when making decisions. Humanity had shown what it meant to be patient, and the galaxy had learned what it meant when that patience ended. No one would ever forget. No one ever did.